number 70, which is the mitzvah, the prohibition of what's called Birkas Hashem. Birkas Hashem means to curse Hashem, what we call to blaspheme. And you notice that in the mitzvah it's listed as blessing Hashem, which is a strange thing to call cursing Hashem. We call it the prohibition of blessing Hashem. So there's often you find in Torah literature, in the Gemara you find several times that the Gemara will resort to a euphemism. So for example, a blind man is called a Sagi Nohor. Sagi Nohor literally means, in Aramaic, Sagi Nohor means much light. So a blind person is called a Sagi Nohor because we don't want to use we don't want to use that negative expression of somebody without any light at all. So we call him a Sagi Nohor. A cemetery is called a Beis HaChaim, the place of the living, which it is not, but as a euphemism to go near. So therefore, this mitzvah, which is the prohibition of blasphemy, of cursing God, is called the mitzvah, the prohibition of blessing God. Right, and blessing in this case means a euphemism. So now the prohibition in the letter, by the letter of this applies to us very much more than you think, gentlemen, because by the letter of the law, the prohibition is to say the Yud Ke Vav Ke, you say Hashem's name, and curse it. Now what they did was at the time, if somebody was guilty, he was executed for blasphemy. What they did is they had a court case. The court process was that they brought in the witnesses, and now the witnesses would describe what they heard. And once they had enough evidence that this sounds like a real blasphemy case, they would tell the main witness, they would tell the more prominent witnesses, okay, they'd send everybody out of the room. They'd say, okay, everybody now, witness, you must tell us exactly what the guy said, which now he's going to repeat the literal blasphemy because he can't execute a guy unless we've heard it. In other words, we want to avoid saying it as long as possible. So the court cross-examines them and we get a sense. They say, well, he said, and they use some sort of, blank should blank, that sort of thing. But then eventually when they're going to make the final judgment, they say, okay, now tell us exactly literally what you said. Then he would stand up and he would say it in court. First, they would send everybody out to minimize the Chil Hashem. He would say it, and then the Gemara says that the judges had to rend their garments because they just heard a blasphemous term, which is the halacha. Anytime you hear blasphemy, anytime you hear any sort of what's it called, apikorsis, any sort of what's the other word for blasphemy? Anything heretical, any heresy that you hear by the letter of halacha, you have to rend your garments. See, nowadays, a person, we don't have Beis Din, but a Jewish community does have the right of excommunication. All through history, excommunication was used. Excommunication was a severe thing because somebody who's excommunicated, nobody's allowed within his 4 amos, which is about 6 feet, as we're learning in the Gemara, and he's off limits to the community. That was sometimes used in order to get a recalcitrant husband who refused to give his wife a get. Give his wife a divorce document, so sometimes that was used in order to punish him. Shabtai Tzvi, the famous false messiah, was eventually excommunicated by the court, I think, in Istanbul, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot where he was, in one of the countries in Turkey. What's the other city? The other city in Turkey? There was Istanbul, there was another country, I think it was in Istanbul. He was put into excommunication. So when he heard that the court excommunicated him, so he said, well, I excommunicate the court. I excommunicate the judges. If they could excommunicate, I could accept that his proclamation meant nothing, whereas theirs did. Now, the underlying idea here is, you see, for one thing, why is it so severe? So first of all, even Noachides, this is one of the 7 Noachide laws. They're not allowed to worship idols. They're not allowed to commit acts of immorality based on what the definitions of immorality. They're not allowed to murder, immorality, and idol worship, rip the limbs off living creatures, steal, and the last prohibition is they're not allowed to blaspheme. They're not allowed to blaspheme. And so even on the Noachide laws, this is such a severe avera that it's so basic that even Noachides only have 6 prohibitions and 1 positive command, which is to set up a system of courts. This is one of the 6 Noachide laws that are prohibited. And it's just so basic that, to go and curse God, is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, even a human king, even a human king, which we'll see in a moment about cursing kings. You got to be very, very careful. So that's the idea. Now the commentaries point out, you see what's really happening here is there's one distinguishing feature between man and animal. There's one distinguishing feature between man and animal, which is speech. Speech. In other words, you're right. When you point, man has intelligence. Where is intelligence manifest? Intelligence manifests in the ability to speak. Animals cannot speak. Human beings have intelligence. When we say intelligence, intelligence really means free choice. Intelligence means free choice. We are capable of choosing. Animals are not capable of choosing. They are capable of instinctively avoiding some things and going for other things. But they don't make choices based on any sort of moral decision. I think it's wrong. You never saw a lion chasing a deer and all of a sudden stopping and saying, well, I shouldn't be behaving like an animal. No lion, no tiger was ever chasing down a zebra and decided, you know what, I don't want to become Fleischix because then I can't have coffee for 6 hours. That never happened. If he doesn't chase the zebra, it's either because he's tired or he's not hungry. I think a cheetah, which is the fastest creature outside of what's his name, the Olympic sprinter, Bolt. Yeah, a cheetah is the fastest creature on Earth, and the cheetah could only sprint about. He's got a very short sprint. He's got to catch the zebra within a certain amount of time, and if he doesn't, he just runs out of energy. But if he doesn't chase him, it's only because he doesn't have energy. It's not like he stopped because he was learning Mesilas Yesharim. It's like, my Musar Rebbe told me I really shouldn't be doing this. Human beings have the ability of choosing. Now, what happens here is, since animals do not have speech and we do, that's a distinguishing feature. Therefore, we should not be violating our capability of speaking. Our speech identifies us as a human being. To go in all the areas where it's prohibited, either lashon hara, which is inappropriate gossip, filthy nivel peh, which is using inappropriate language, blasphemy. That means we're taking a feature that's our identifying feature that elevates us, and we're actually making ourselves worse than animals. We're worse than animals when we misuse our mouth. You know why? No animal ever speaks lashon hara. How do you like that? No cheetah in history has ever spoken lashon hara, right? No gorilla has ever used bad words, right? Just doesn't exist. They have their own way of communicating. What's that?
What about parrots and minor birds?
Parrots and minor, they're not saying it on purpose. They're only saying it on, they're only parroting. They're not thinking and violating their mouth. As a matter of fact, by the way, just a basic piece of Torah 101. When the snake tempts Chava. So he says, eat from the tree. Now it's very interesting because, the commentators say, there's one basic question on that piece of Torah, which is the first parsha in the Torah. The Nachash says to Chava, eat from the fruit of the tree, and there's only one problem: snakes can't talk. So there are different answers. Well, that was then, they could, and there are different answers. But one of the commentators of Shinshin Raphael Hirsch says that sure, on a literal level, the snake spoke, and however it is that you reconcile that with the various questions. But you see, there's a deeper message here. The Torah is telling you that the snake speaking to Chava is the animal in man. Every human being has an animal in him. And when she takes a look at the fruit looks good, smells good, tastes good. Every animal in the natural world, if something looks good, smells good, and tastes good, they indulge. There's nothing stopping them from indulging. Unless they're threatened, or unless they're not hungry. If he looks good, smells good, tastes good, you indulge. No animal ideologically restrains himself. So what the Nachash, the snake and serpent, is telling Chava is, look, it looks good, it smells good, and it tastes good. So why shouldn't you indulge? And she's got an internal battle. Because on the one hand, her husband told her that we have a moral imperative not to indulge. On the other hand, the animal within her is saying, what, are you out of your mind? Why shouldn't you indulge? It looks good, smells good, and tastes good, which is a battle that we all have, isn't it? It looks good, smells good, tastes good. What kind of idea? What, I shouldn't eat it because somebody made up a kosher law? Therefore, I shouldn't eat it? Where did you get that idea? All I am is a two-legged animal. That's the battle that we're always fighting. So as a Torah Jew, we understand, no, that wasn't the law that a human being made up. That's a law that God made up. God says don't eat it because it's not kosher. And now I've got a moral obligation to not eat it. And therefore I have to control the animal and man. What the animal is telling you, what's the Nike slogan?
Do it.
Just do it. That's exactly the first temptation in history was the Nachash saying to Chava, just do it. And that's why I've mentioned in the past that Nike swoosh looks mysteriously like the snake, doesn't it? Right there it is. There's the snake. It's doesn't look like it with a little imagination. Oh, come on, guys, make my day. With a little imagination, it looks like a cobra. With the Nike thing. Just do it. That's exactly what the animal is telling you. We're different than animals. Therefore, the Torah says that's how severe it is. See, that's one of the problems we have in our day and age, is that we are so loose with our mouths. We mentioned this a couple of classes ago. We're so loose with our mouths, just in areas where it's almost innocuous, but just to show you how loose we are. Adjectives are used nowadays that in the old days, growing up, we didn't use these adjectives. So you could sit down at a salad on Shabbos and you say, wow, this salad is amazing. And we used words like amazing. When I was growing up, amazing was Niagara Falls. That was amazing. Or somebody says, wow, this soup is awesome. Awesome was when somebody made a catch at the last second with one hand with 2 feet sticking down in the end zone and won the game. That was awesome. It wasn't like, oh wow, I had some clear chicken soup. Wow, this soup is awesome. That wasn't awesome. The salad's good and the soup is nice. Or whatever the English say, food is nice. We never said that. In America, we never say, well, right? Then they would say, well, this cake is nice, right? Don't you say that? Right, we don't say that. Nice is people. Cake is consumed. But the what do you call it? At the end of the day, it's just elusive. It means nothing. So then when you want to describe Niagara Falls, wow, it's awesome. Well, okay, so Niagara Falls is awesome and my salad is awesome. That means Niagara Falls and my salad are essentially the same. You've lost the meaning. You lost the meaning of the words. The same thing in the way we talk. The way we talk. And I'm as guilty as the next guy. Either we're crude or just the way our language. Yo, bro. Yo, bro. I'm down for that. It's not even. There's nothing refined about it. We've lost any sense of refinement. I had a guy once here at the yeshiva. I told you several times. I had a guy at the coffee machine. So I asked him for change. So he gave me change. I said, "Thanks a lot." He says to me, "No problem, dog." Just like that. He says, "No problem, dog." And he turns and starts walking away. And I was looking at it. I wasn't insulted because I realized that was the highest epithet. That you could possibly achieve is to be called a dog. I am now officially a dog with a cup of coffee. That's I woke up be better at 10 in the morning. And I just, it didn't bother me to call me dog. It bothered me that he didn't dawn on him even for a split second that perhaps somebody older than you and a rabbi, maybe you shouldn't call him dog. I don't mind that he did because it means I'm one of them. Want to hear me bark? I don't mind. But it just means we're so loose. Everything you just say, blurt it out. That's what's underlying this idea. Now, Rav Pam Zatzal was the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Vodaas. So he was once given a very refined man. He was actually called the Chafetz Chaim of our generation. Very refined man, very careful man, very sweet, gentle man. So he was once giving a shiur, and he told his Talmidim, don't use the expression whatchamacallit. Don't say whatchamacallit. So one of the Talmidim said, why? I mean, it's not crude. I mean, what's wrong with saying whatchamacallit? So Rav Pam said, you're right. There's nothing inherently coarse about the word itself. But when you say whatchamacallit, it's just an indication you didn't think before you spoke. Because had you thought before you spoke, you would know what you were going to say, and you wouldn't have said whatchamacallit. Right? You didn't think before you thought, okay, it's not the end of the world. It's just an indication of how we're supposed to relate to speech. The Chazon Ish was once walking with a Talmud of his. Chazon Ish once said to a Talmud of his, do you have a pen? So he said, I have a pen, but it doesn't write. So the Chazon Ish says, and I have a broomstick, but it doesn't write either. Do you understand what he was telling him? I wasn't taking a survey. When I said, do you have a pen? That wasn't a survey. I needed a writing implement. Well, I have a pen, but it doesn't write. Well, shkoyach, I have a lawnmower, it doesn't write either. I mean, what was it, let's all compare what we have that doesn't write. What's the point? The answer is, no, I don't, I'm sorry. That's the answer, because you don't have a pen. That's what you needed. We're so loose with the speech, that's what's unright. That's how a person gets to blasphemy.